This is the Bema Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are discussing Israel's arrival at Sinai and the ensuing covenant relationship with their God, covering Exodus 19 through 23.
Yeah, 19 through 23. We're going to be wrapping up our study here of Exodus in the next few episodes. People have noticed, hopefully, we're moving a little bit more quickly. Like our journey through Genesis was... It wasn't verse by verse by any means, but it was slow, methodical. We were taking our time. We were paying attention to the stories and the characters and the details. We think Genesis is important. We think all the books of the Bible are important. Let's be real. But at some point, we're going to have to start picking up the pace. So you've noticed as we kind of we're going to start covering more ground a little bit more quickly, like, the whole book of Leviticus in one episode, that kind of.
I mean, I'm encouraged by that for multiple reasons, Marty.
So
but
true.
Also, we do need to get to the end of the Bible before the end of our lifetime, ideally. So
we do.
We got to pick it up at some point.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. That's where we've been. I guess we could do a little bit of a rough review. We started in Genesis. We started with a section that we call the preface. We talked about things like the story is good. We talked about how this preface is essentially like this essential background of the story, and how this background is really about insecurity and fear is what we've been really seeing and looking at. Like, you can let your story be run by all the fears of what you don't have, all the fears of what you're not, all your insecurities that you bring, or you can trust that you are loved. You can trust that creation is good. And that's what the preface is inviting us to do, the way we frame our view of the world. And we hear a bunch of stories, and we hear about the dangers of what happens when you don't trust the story. When you let your fears and insecurities drive, it's pretty ugly. And that led us into the introduction, where we met the family of God, people like Abraham and Isaac, Jacob and Joseph. And they are far from perfect, and they have plenty of fears and insecurities. And there are chapters and stories and seasons where they let fear and insecurity drive the story. And it leads to those same tragedies, but they are willing to trust the story. They're willing to pick up the pieces. They're willing to lean back in and not let those dark moments define their journey. And whenever they do trust the story, it enables them to lay down their lives for other people. Like, they get to truly practice forgiveness. They get to truly practice hospitality. Instead of seeking self-preservation because of fear, they lay their lives down in self-sacrifice because they trust that there's enough to go around. And that's what we see. And that set the stage for what we called the narrative. And the narrative that we called the Tale of Two Kingdoms, Empire versus Shalom. And we could reframe it, fear versus trust. Empire is going to be the kingdom of fear, and Shalom is going to be the kingdom of trust. And these two narratives that just constantly battle. And that's what we've been doing. That's what we've seen here as we've went through Exodus. And in order to do this, God has rescued his people out of Egypt in the story of the Passover, the Exodus. And he's brought his people to Mount Sinai. And on their way, they've had these three tests that we just got done looking at. God has tested their heart, their soul, and their mayod, their might, we might say. God has put to the test, will you love me with all your heart? Will you love me with all your soul? And will you love me with all of your everything you have to offer, all of your might? And so that's been our review. That gets us to where we are today. And we're going to be talking today about ancient Eastern weddings. And we have a presentation today, right, Brent?
We have a presentation, which maybe you saw coming, maybe you didn't. I'm guessing, if you're like me, you did not see it coming, that we'll be talking about weddings.
Yeah.
Why would we be talking about weddings?
Yeah, we have ourselves quite the little setup, and that's what we're going to unpack. That's what we're going to unpack today. Is why would we be talking about the wedding? What is going on here? I thought we were talking about Mount Sinai. I thought we were talking about the Exodus. I thought we were talking about Passover, lambs, blood, being born again. Like, why? Testing of the heart. What's the wedding? What's this wedding talk all about? So I want to talk about ancient Eastern weddings. And I remember when we first recorded this, there really wasn't a source that I had run across in my bibliography yet that packaged it the way that I'm going to package it today, that had put the details together in the way that I've put them together. And a lot of people listen to this episode and they say, can you give me a citation or a source that goes over what you went over today? And at that point, I didn't necessarily have a source that that packaged it the way that I did or I do. I'm going to make a recommendation before we're out today of where I learned this. But as far as an academic citation or source, I didn't have a whole lot. Now, when I recorded this the first time years ago, I had just actually read some of the side articles, some of the little, I won't necessarily call them footnotes, but the sub-articles that you'll find in a study Bible. I had an old study Bible, a Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible. Still one of my favorite Bibles, but it is the old 1984 NIV. They released it right before they updated everything. But it was a great resource. They have a lot of newer ones today. I think we could probably link, I would say it's modern reimagination is probably the historical cultural backgrounds, the cultural backgrounds study Bible, I think is what it's called.
Cultural background study Bible, yes.
Okay, there you go. So we'll link that one. It's kind of like the newer version of it. And I think you mentioned, Brent, you actually have a copy of that. I've got a copy of the old Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible. You have a copy of that cultural background study Bible. You did a quick flip through the articles. You didn't necessarily see it. Doesn't mean it's not in there. But my point being is I had run across it. I had read a lot of these details. They're not a secret. They'll be hiding in a cultural study pretty easily. In the years that followed, I ran across 3 sources that were just specifically studying ancient Israel, family structure, marriages, weddings, households, all of that. And they're not necessarily recommendations. I wouldn't necessarily recommend these as sources. I'm just saying when people are looking for citations, sometimes my insecurities get the better of me, talking about letting a story be driven by insecurity. And I feel like everybody's asking me to prove it and cite my sources. So there was a source called Ancient Israel, Its Life and Institutions. None of these are like super up-to-date sources, but I did give that one 3 stars. So that means it's not a recommendation for me, but it touched on a lot of things. I didn't agree with everything that it came down with or what it did, but you can read about a lot of those things there. There was another source called Families in Ancient Israel. That one was at least edited by Leo Perdue. Another 3-star source. So again, didn't love everything I saw or read or even agree with all their assessments, but you could read about it on an academic level. There was a source, another 3 stars for me. Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. That one's going to be Joachim Jeremias. He was a German theologian. That's pretty dated scholarship, but a very common name you'll find. He touched on little bits and pieces here and there. Anyway, those were 3 sources that touch on a lot of the elements we're going to look at today. There are better sources out there. I just haven't run across them. They're not in my bibliography yet. I'll put it that way. But I can add to the list since the last time we came through here. So we'll put some of those things in the show notes. Just remember that's not necessarily recommendations that everything I read in there is how I see it or what I agree with, but you can bump around against these ideas. That's what we're doing here in BEMA. We're trying to teach ourselves how to study, ask good questions, think critically, and learn about history. So there you go.
Indeed, more sources this time, but more yet to come at some point in the future. So we just keep studying.
That's how we keep doing it. That's how it goes. That's the name of the game. So let's just talk about these ancient weddings. We often think, when we think about these ancient marriages, we often assume one of 2 faults, a false dichotomy. On one hand, we picture the wedding that we think of today. My own freedom, I fall in love with somebody, there's this romantic relationship, we choose to get married, and that's not what's happening in the ancient world of the Bible. On the flip side, we usually default to, well, it's just these hard, patriarchal arranged marriages, and you're forced to marry people you don't even know, and all of these, both extremes. There's going to be exceptions where those would be realized realities, but that's not how it was culturally either. In these ancient worlds, you lived together in these larger extended family units. We've talked about things like the Beit Av, the house of my father, the even larger family unit of the Mishpacha. Mishpacha is a Hebrew word that means family. And your larger extended family, the Mishpacha, would get together and they would arrange these relationships together. Your autonomy wasn't removed from this process. You were free to communicate your own desires. I would even maybe use the word suggestions. You might even have some suggestions, some names that you may want to put in the hat of your mishpacha to suggest. You may have your eye. You may have a romantic interest on somebody. I don't know. There was a time in the spring, early summer, was the grape harvest. I could have that. I could be wrong. But whenever the grape harvest was, they would bring all of the grape harvest into the wine press. And there was this one festival at the end of the grape harvest where they would get together, and the party was all the unmarried women, all the virgins, is the language that often gets used in that world. They would all dress in these white gowns, and they would get in the wine presses, and they would dance on the grapes. There's a movie out there called The Nativity Story, where there's a brief little scene right after Mary, basically it becomes known that she's come back home, she's pregnant, and now she has this shame put on her. And part of the shame that she experiences is at this time of year during that festival. There's all the unmarried women dancing in the wine press. So part of the way that it gets written about historically is this time where these are all the eligible ladies and then all the eligible men. This is some of the time where they might be, looking for a candidate for a future relationship. So these aren't like hard, rigid. It's a family activity. It is something you're doing together as a whole group of family members.
Yeah, and Marty, I don't know if you said it just now, but it is your favorite Christmas movie. And
it is.
We do talk about it on a future episode.
Oh, yes, an episode from the future. You're right. Yep.
Episode 310 is where we talk about that. So it's a fun conversation.
You want to link that in the show notes there?
Sure, why not?
All right, why not? It'll be in the show notes.
Give people a hall pass to jump ahead if they're really interested in that movie.
One hall pass. I like it. Granted. All right, so from that, you'll end up getting the betrothal. And again, you'll see this in the Nativity Story. It's part of the reason it's why it's one of my favorite movies, Brent, is because you see so many of the things we're going to talk about in that movie. But there's a betrothal, and the father of the groom will show up, the groom-to-be, and they'll show up with the father of the bride-to-be. And there will be a cup of wine that the father of the groom will pour, and he'll hand that cup of wine to the groom-to-be, and he will extend that cup of wine to the betrothed, or who he wants to be betrothed to, and he will say, "This is a cup of a new covenant, of a covenant that I make with you today. I will not drink of this cup again until I drink it anew in my Father's house." That's their way of saying, "Will you marry me?" Like, this is, I want to make a covenant with you. I want to become betrothed. If she drinks from that cup, it's her way of saying yes. If she pushes the cup away and refuses to drink, she's refusing the betrothal. Now, we don't have on record that I'm aware of anybody ever refusing a betrothal. It would be like spitting in the face of your entire mishpacha. They've gone to all this work. They've prayerfully crafted this relationship. They've listened to your own thoughts. They've tried to do what's best. And if you push away what the family has arranged, and it has economic implications and it has social implications, you've really just spit in the face of your family. So part of the reason why we don't typically have a record of her ever saying no, is she may never be married. The marriage, they may move on and not arrange a marriage for her. Who knows? But we just don't have a record of her doing that very often, if at all.
I would say probably pretty uncommon today as well.
Yeah.
It's not usually this spontaneous thing in either case.
Yes.
And so by the time all of the things have played out, and it's just a different set of considerations in the ancient world because it is so much more communal.
Absolutely. 100%. So let's assume that she says yes. She takes a cup, and there might be a little mini celebration. There may be a little mini party, probably not something too big, if anything at all. And then that father of the groom and the groom, they're going to go back. They're probably not from the same village, because the same village is probably too interconnected. It's probably a lot of your cousins, a lot of family connections. So they're probably from another village of some kind. Maybe they're not, but there's a good chance they probably are. They go back to their village, and he starts to build onto his literal father's house. Like, his father has what we call today insula. Now, insula is a Latin word. It's not Greek. It's not Hebrew. It's Latin. But insula is the word that the academic community uses to talk about these multifamily dwellings. You lived in that Beidov with your father, with your cousins, with your extended family, with your brothers, with your sisters. It wasn't a single family dwelling. It's a multifamily dwelling. So as the family keeps marrying off and growing, you keep adding on a new portion. You keep making the home bigger. And we'll talk about insula some other time. But you go and you have a little building project. You are preparing the house for the future expansion of this marriage. And so the father is going to be in this process of checking in. And the father's going to have his own way of doing it. He might work right alongside of the son. Every day, every father is going to be different, and every father is going to know that his son is different. And his son has a particular set of needs. Maybe he's really bullheaded and stubborn and prideful. Maybe he is a strong collaborator. I don't know. But the father might work alongside of him every single day, helping him do the work. The father might let him do the work on his own. The father might come in on every single day and check in and help guide and direct. The father might say nothing and come in 3 weeks into the project and look around and say, you can't do this. Tear it down and start over. Like whatever the father wants to do to help guide, direct, develop his son, help his son mature. That's what the father is going to do. The son doesn't know when it will be done. The son doesn't know when it's going to be done. The bride doesn't know. They're all going to be waiting in the other village. And it could be, it could be that the fathers are talking. Like it could be that behind the scenes, Dad 1 is talking to Dad 2 and saying like, hey, it's getting pretty close. Like we're probably a few days out. We're probably a couple weeks out. But culturally speaking, they don't know. The families have no idea. And maybe the dads don't talk. We don't have notes from history that tell us that they did communicate. The notes that we have give us the impression that they literally had no idea. He could show up. When the building project is all done, the father's going to say it's time. And I imagine the son jumping on the donkey, grabbing his backpack, doing it like he's ready, like he's been ready for this day. Father says it's time, and he takes off down the road. The father's like, hey, hold on. We got to get the rest of the family. We got to slow down. But he's ready to go. So he could show up at any time. Could be the middle of the night. I think of the story of the 10 bridesmaids that Jesus tells. Jesus tells a parable about these 10 virgins, these 10 bridesmaids. 5 of them are ready with their lamps. They've got oil. They're ready to go. 5 of them don't have oil. The groom shows up in the middle of the night. This gives you context to why that story is the way. It's a weird story for us. What's going on? In their world, this story makes all kinds of sense. In their world, these 5 bridesmaids that don't have their oils ready, their lamps ready with oil and trimmed wicks, they're fools because they should have been ready. The groom could show up at any time. Like that's the context for that story. Because when he shows up, the party starts. The groom's going to arrive. The lookout is going to shout, here comes the groom and the bridal and the wedding party. Everything happening in the village, middle of the day, middle of the night, whatever. They're going to stop. They're going to come in from their work. They're going to come in from the fields. It's time for a wedding. The bride is going to be whisked away to be consecrated. There's going to be like a ritual bath that she's going to go through called a mikveh, similar to like a ritual baptism. Don't think Christian baptism, but think like a ritual cleansing. She's going to be consecrated. She's going to be prepared. Think of the way that a bride's going to go. She's going to spend that day getting ready and having all of her bridesmaids and the person doing the makeup and the person doing the hair and the same kind of energy. She's going away to get consecrated, to get ready. There's a shofar, a trumpet that's going to sound to begin the ceremony. They're going to gather under what's called the chuppah. Now that's spelled Chuppah. Chuppah, the chuppah. A lot of people look at it and say the chalupa. No, that's from Taco Bell. This is the chuppah.
Oh, let's not make people too hungry here.
Yeah, I know.
Let's get to the wedding feast, please.
Yeah, and hopefully they don't have Taco Bell catering. So they've got the chuppah, and this chuppah is this it's going to be a prayer shawl, typically a talit, held up on these posts and these poles. We're going to actually try to find a photo of some kind to show you what a chuppah might be in your presentation there. You can see what a chuppah looks like. But it symbolizes the presence of God. Like this wedding happens underneath God's presence. Like he's there, like at the ceremony, like hovering over the couple as they take their vows. There's going to be, while they stand under the chuppah, they're going to present what's called the ketubah. It's going to be about 7, 10, 12 items that define the relationship. Eventually later, in a more modern era, the ketubah is actually going to have like contractual protections for the bride. So like in Jesus's day, the ketubah was like, if you divorce her, this is what you have to pay her. Almost like a prenuptial type agreement. In the ancient world, it probably had far less of the prenuptial feel and far more of a defining the relationship, defining the covenant type of a feel to it. And then there's the consummation of the marriage. There's actually a room that's been set aside for them to consummate that marriage. There's a best man, we would call it. They don't call him the best man, but we would think of like the best man, the friend of the groom, who stands at the door and listens. John the Baptist actually says this in the Gospels. John the Baptist says, I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the groom, But I am the one that's preparing the way, and I stand at the door and I listen, and I'm waiting for the wedding to happen. And the wedding has happened. It's here. The kingdom of God is being consummated. And I'm here to tell you that the kingdom of God is at hand, is what John the Baptist says. So this best man character proclaims that the covenant is consummated. There usually is a conversation about some kind of bloody cloth that's presented to prove virginity. In the ancient world, that's a big, I don't want to get hung up there. It's hard for us to process in our world. And I don't know how to answer all the questions, good questions that always get asked about, you're not always going to be able to produce a bloody cloth. There's a million things that could happen to a young girl. I don't know how they did that in the ancient world, but we do have record of them talking about this. Deuteronomy references this bloody cloth that proves that she was who she needed to be on her wedding night, contractually. When somebody wants to accuse the father of betraying them, it's there. It's some sense of proof of purity. And again, if that bothers us, probably rightly so, for good reason. But that's a part of the story, part of what gets used in your New Testament. When Paul talks about presenting the church as a bride without blemish, those are the kind of things that they're toying with there. And then there's going to be a multiple day party that ensues at the wedding. Probably as that party gets started, the two fathers probably get together in the back and they exchange what we would call wedding gifts. There's a huge scholarly conversation about the bride price and the dowry and the more. And there's all these different terms, and everybody argues about what they were and how they functioned and who is what and what is who. And you can read about that in those books that I recommended, or I didn't recommend, but I referenced earlier. All those things are exchanged there. I say all of this because, Brent, you asked a question at the beginning of this episode. Why in the world would we be talking about all this? I thought we were talking about Mount Sinai.
Yeah. I mean, so far I'm hearing all kinds of things that sound familiar for various reasons, but still nothing about Sinai that necessarily makes a connection.
Beautiful. Well, how about you read for us Exodus 19, verse 5 through 6. Let's get into our biblical text today, and we'll start pulling this together.
Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites.
All right, this verse here uses, we don't catch it in the English, but in that ancient Eastern world uses all kinds of very heavy marital wedding talk. When he says, you will be for me my treasured possession, that phrase treasured possession is used even today in Jewish weddings. That's wedding talk. Historically, it's almost exclusively used within wedding talk. So God is saying, if you want to say yes, if you will agree to this thing that we're doing, then you're going to be for me a wife, a bride. We're going to have a special covenantal relationship. Moses is going to immediately be told in the next verse, to go consecrate the people. There are so many parallels to what's taking place that we're actually going to go through them here in a moment, but I'm going to have you read all these verses. But what we find is that the relationship between God and his people in Torah is told almost exactly like a wedding. Like we have on your presentation, these steps and these elements on the slide there in front of you. I want to go back through those steps and those elements, and I want to see them in the biblical text. Okay? So first of all, there's a betrothal. I think of Genesis 12, where God said, leave your father's house. What is that? He tells Abraham, I need you to leave your father's house. I need you to go west to the place that I will show you. What is that? Leave your father's house. That's marriage. That's engagement talk. 3 chapters later, what kind of a covenant did we use in Genesis 15, Brent? Can you remember?
The blood path covenant.
The blood path covenant. And we mentioned the blood path covenant in the ancient world is almost exclusively what kind of a covenant?
A marriage covenant.
Yeah, it's a betrothal covenant, an ancient Eastern betrothal covenant. So God asks Avram to leave his father's house. One of the first things God does with Avram is set up a betrothal covenant. You could say, in a sense, God then disappears. Think about their time in Egypt. It's almost as if where's God? Where has God been? Does God even remember us? Is God even real? Does God even exist? The groom has left, you could say, to prepare a place for his bride, to work on their house, to go work on the promised land. It's not ready yet. That's what he told Avram back in Genesis 15 when he got betrothed. So now God kind of disappears, just like you would in a wedding scenario. And then God all of a sudden arrives, and he brings them to the ceremony, which is Mount Sinai. We read the passage that you just read, Exodus 19, 5 through 6. and the verses that follow. And then God tells Moses to consecrate the people. Give us just a few verses later, Brent, verse 19:10, Exodus 19:10.
And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow.
All right, so there's the consecration for the wedding. It means that in the next few verses, we should have the sound of a shofar, the beginning of the ceremony. That's going to tell us that the ceremony's begun. Give me verse 16.
On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled.
All right. Should be gathering under a chuppah. Keep reading. Brent, give me the next few verses.
Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him.
So we have the people going out, and some rabbis use the word, they actually camp under the mountain. The rabbis will say under the mountain. And they do that on purpose to put them under a chuppah. I believe, if I remember correctly, the word is actually neged. If you remember neged, etzer kenegdo. Etzer kenegdo, Brent, remind me.
That was with Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. So like the first, you could say, wedding. First husband and wife situation, etzer kenegdo. They come neged against the mountain under a chuppah. This, my goodness, this is a wedding. If they're under the chuppah, the next thing that should happen is they should be presenting a ketubah. What's the next thing that happens, Brent? Exodus 20, we have the
10 Commandments.
We said it was a list of 7, 10, 12 things. Here's a list of 10 things that define the relationship. Those 10 Commandments, they're not just 2 tablets with basic laws and rules on them. They are the ketubah, the wedding covenant, defined on stone. Rabbis will say that's why there's 2 stones. There's 2 tablets. Some will say it's because there's 2 copies. The groom and the bride have to have a copy of the ketubah. This is what we would expect next. Next, we would see the wedding gifts. It's interesting. The Jews always talk about the Torah, the law, the book of Leviticus as wedding gifts. These are our wedding gifts. The law isn't oppressive. It's not a set of rules that we had to follow. It's what God gave us as a gift to enable us to have a relationship. Those are our wedding gifts. Don't talk about the laws don't dismiss the laws if it's burdensome and horrible and, oh, what a tragedy to follow the law. The law is my wedding gifts, the Jews might say. The marriage is consummated in the wilderness. We'll talk about the book of Numbers here in a few episodes. We'll talk about the book of Numbers as God's wilderness. Desert honeymoon is the words that we'll put on our review. Desert honeymoon. The book of God's people at Mount Sinai is, without a doubt, a wedding. A wedding. And Brent, you asked a question the last time we did this, and I thought it was can make us uncomfortable, but it was a good. Do you remember the question you asked about which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, it was something like, did their weddings come out of this process that they went through with God? And then they're like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do our weddings that way. Or was it like, this is how they were always doing weddings, and then God comes in and says, okay, let me give it to you in a way that you're going to understand?
Yeah, and it's a real insightful question. And a lot of it's going to come down to when we think the Bible was written. And my answer is going to be, I always assume a little bit of both. Like there are elements there that are clearly playing off, like the chuppah. Well, the chuppah symbolizes God's presence because of the cloud at Mount Sinai. So that's definitely a callback to Mount Sinai. And yet Mount Sinai is definitely formed after these ancient Eastern weddings. So it's a little bit of back and forth. And I think a lot of people that may engage in the world of textual criticism will probably have a lot to say about when is the Bible actually written, when is the book of Exodus actually penned, and these details shaped and crafted. And those things may be, neither here nor there for us, especially at this point in our journey. But I still think it's a really good question. So probably a little bit of both. We're probably seeing marriages crafted around the experience at Sinai, and we're seeing Sinai crafted around their understanding of wedding and marriage. I thought that was a good question you asked last time. And by the way, it doesn't stop at Mount Sinai. I think Jesus does a ton of this. I think we see this all throughout the New Testament without a doubt. I think of John 14.
Oh, yeah. As you were going through this list, a lot of this stuff was like, hey, this sounds familiar.
Exactly. Jesus says, my Father's house has many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you. If it were not so, I would not have told you this, but I go to prepare a place for you, so where that I am, there you may also be. That is absolutely wedding talk. I think about chapter 13 of Mark 13. About the day or hour, nobody knows. Not the angels in heaven, not even the Son, only the Father knows. There's a story in Talmud that sounds very, very similar to this, Brent. There's a story in Talmud about a son. He's just been betrothed. He's working on the father's house. Somebody walks by and they says, when is your wedding? When are you going to be done building so you can go be married to your bride? And in frustration, he throws his hat and his hammer to the ground, and he says, nobody knows, not the sun, the moon, and the stars, not the angels in heaven, not the Son, only the Father knows when I'll be done building onto his house. He's so frustrated. And Jesus uses very similar language. I don't know the day or the hour. Only the Father knows. Only the Father knows. I think about Mark 14, the very next chapter, or we find this also in the book of Matthew, when Jesus at the Last Supper, this is the cup of a new covenant I make with you. I will not drink of this cup again until I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. That's blatantly marriage talk. And there's so many examples of this, but it's marriage talk. It's wedding talk. And maybe just one more observation before we keep moving on. It falls outside of, Exodus 19 through 24 or whatever our chapters were. But if this is a wedding and the ketubah was the 10 Commandments, what is happening at the wedding ceremony as it's taking place? Brent, read us Exodus 32, verse 19.
When Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain.
See, they're in the middle of the wedding, like they're literally in the middle of the wedding ceremony, like they're standing under the chuppah, like. And I'm not trying to be crude at all when I give this example, but it's like the groom turns around to grab the ketubah under the chuppah, and as he turns back around, the bride is committing like adultery. She's breaking the betrothal covenant right there in the middle of the ceremony with one of the groomsmen. And I'm not trying to make the golden calf a groomsman, but you get the power of that image. Like, oh my goodness. And of course Moses is furious. And of course he takes the wedding covenant and he smashes it in anger. Like, you're not worthy of this. Like, you're in the middle of a wedding and this is what you're doing. It's kind of a side note, definitely related. Give me the very next verse there, Exodus 32:20.
And he took the calf the people had made and burned it in the fire. Then he ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it.
And this is another one of those instances of which came first, the chicken or the egg, like which one is calling back to which. But we're going to hear about this later, 2 books later in the book of Numbers. Brent, if you don't mind, read me the test of an unfaithful wife in Numbers 5. And for all of our listeners, I know this is an ancient world, coming out of a world of more patriarchal social structures, and there's all kinds of rightful critical critique about how we would read this passage. But within its historical context, within what Torah's doing, read me Numbers 5, 16 through 18, and then grab verse 24 while you're in there.
The priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. Then he shall take some holy water in a clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. After the priest has had the woman stand before the Lord, he shall loosen her hair and place in her hands the reminder offering, the grain offering for jealousy, while he himself holds the bitter water that brings a curse. And then down in 24, he shall make the woman drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and this water that brings a curse and causes bitter suffering will enter her.
Okay, so Moses is there's clearly an interplay between these two stories. Here they are at the wedding story, in the middle of a wedding ceremony, committing adultery. Moses grinds up the calf and has her drink it, has the bride drink it, has the people drink it. And in the Numbers story, we're told that if she's guilty, God will send a curse. God will send a plague. We're told in the book of Exodus that a whole bunch of people, we're not given a number, but a whole bunch of people will die. It would appear that God rendered his judgment. They followed exactly what the adultery law is going to end up becoming, whatever one came first, and God sent his judgment. I find it interesting, by the way, as a side note, that Moses will then take matters into his own hand later, and at his command, he's going to say God commanded it, but at his command, he's going to slaughter 3,000 people with the help of the Israelites. And to me, it just feels like God already rendered his judgment. Why is Moses doubling down on even harsher judgment? But we'll talk about that story later in our Baymont journey. I just find my point is this. This is a wedding. This is a wedding. This is a wedding. This is a wedding. All the images are weddings. All the language is wedding. Even the sin that's they're engaging in is framed within wedding talk. And in the midst of all of that, in the midst of the heat and the heaviness of that metaphor and what's taking place, I want us to realize that what God then does is he says, Moses, I need you to come back up on the mountain because I'm going to do what, Brent? What is God going to do?
He's going to make new tablets.
He's going to make new tablets, which floors me every time I hear this story. Like he's going to pick up right where he left off. She just committed adultery in the middle of the wedding ceremony. We deal with it. We get everybody calmed down. We get everybody to sit back down in their seats. And it's like God goes, okay, now where were we? Like this is that same God who would walk through a blood path. It's the same God who would put his bow in the clouds. It's the same God. It's the same God. It's the same God. It's the same God. When we see the gravity of that metaphor, when we see the wedding, and then we see what God is doing here, it's just so striking to me, like who God is in the midst of this incredible story. What kind of a God does this? I have written in my notes. And it leads me to want to close by reframing the 10 Commandments. What if we listened to the 10 Commandments, not as a list of 10 rules, Brent, but what if we ended our episode today by just, let's go through the 10 Commandments and let's just hear them with wedding language. So I'm going to have you read each commandment, and we're actually not going to call them commandments. We're going to read each of the 10 sayings. Did you know that's what they call them? Decalogos, 10 words, 10 sayings. We call them the 10 Commandments, but the Bible never actually calls them commandments because they're not all commandments. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But I want to read each one of these 10 sayings, and then I want to reframe it in wedding talk. So, Brent, if you're in Exodus 20, how about you give me verse 1 and 2?
Yeah, and the NIV is particularly amusing because the subtitle is the 10 Commandments, and then the text says it's translated words.
Yeah, that's right, 10 words.
And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery.
All right, and that's the first one, by the way. Did you know that the Jews number the commandments, quote unquote, differently than we do? And I know that a lot of Christians are probably familiar with the fact that the Protestants and the Catholics number the 10 Commandments differently. Like, they're numbered differently at the end. Like, when you get to the end, they're broken up around coveting. And the Catholics combine an earlier covenant, and then they split up the last covenant about coveting. And the Protestants don't. So we're somewhat familiar, but what I wasn't familiar with until much later in my education was that the Jews had a completely third different rendering of the 10 Commandments. This is the first quote-unquote commandment. And you're like, this isn't even a commandment at all. All he just said is that read it one more time, Brent.
I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery.
And if I was going to reframe it, I would simply say this, I am your husband. And then the next two, we usually see them as two commandments. The first two commandments. In the Jewish world, they're actually one saying, one word, one commandment. So give me verses 3 through 6.
You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments.
Yeah, so that first one was, I am your husband. That second one would be, you are to have no other lovers. I don't even want you to have pictures, photographs of other lovers. I don't want you to have posters of other lovers. I am your husband. You are to have no other lovers. Don't even have pictures of other lovers. Give me verse 7.
You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name.
In marriage talk, I would say, honor our family name and the reputation that we build together. Give me verse 8 through 11.
Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
In wedding speak, set aside a date night once a week just for the two of us. Give me verse 12.
Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you.
In wedding talk, I would say, don't wish to be somebody else. Give me verse 13.
You shall not murder.
Okay, now if this is about the bride, we are the bride. So if we are killing each other, like this is going to be I would frame it this way. If it were me, I would say, recognize your own worth and presence. And I don't say that you and me as individuals, but us together, we are the bride. So why would the bride hurt herself? Why would we murder each other? Recognize our own worth and our own presence. Verse 14, Brent.
You shall not commit adultery.
Protect your sexuality. How about verse 15?
You shall not steal.
Don't take away from your own needs. How about verse 16?
You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor.
Please tell the truth about yourself. Finally, verse 17.
You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
In wedding talk, I would close by saying, be satisfied with the stuff that we have together. And I can remember learning this in the deserts of Israel with Ray. And when he framed this as a wedding ceremony, it's where I heard this for the very first time, before I had studied it, before I had checked out any of those ideas or done any of my own study and research. I heard this for the first time. I remember hearing the Ten Commandments going, oh, how that changes everything. Oh, how that changes everything. I remember Ray grabbing his wedding ring off of his finger and saying, this is the sign of my covenant, the sign of a marriage ceremony that I had with my wife. What's the sign of the people of God? And he read the passage about the Sabbath. This Sabbath is the sign of the covenant between me and you. The Sabbath is like our wedding ring. It's like this reminder of the thing that we have together. And boy, did that radically change the way that I viewed the people of God in the desert, receiving the Torah of God, and the thing that they were doing together. What a wild way to reframe and reshape what's happening at Mount Sinai. Under the chuppah. I don't know if you got anything else that you think of or want to add, Brett, but that's what I got in my notes.
Well, just as you were saying, the thing about the Sabbath and being a sign, like it's this thing that comes up every week, and it's not just you, but it's your family, it's your servants, your animals, any foreigners who happen to be in your town.
Yes.
Like it is a constant reminder. It's not a subtle sign. Because
it's about the whole bride. It's about all of us. There's no part of the bride that can't be involved in the sign. There's no part of the bride that can't be the bride has to be fully present to really enjoy and be reminded of and be in the midst of this relationship that is the divine marriage. And I just love that. It's so good. Great point.
All right. Well, be sure to check out the presentation from this episode if you haven't had a chance to already. You can go to BamOnDiscipleship.com and find that on the episode page. This is episode 22. You can just do BamOnDiscipleship.com/22. It'll take you straight to the episode. Or in your podcast app, you can probably just scroll down and see all the links there. We've got those books that we referenced. We've got that nativity story episode if you want to think about the pictures that we see in that movie for some of the things that we talked about today. Plenty of ways to dig into this. And we know, we come out of this knowing we still have more sources to find, more resources to uncover at some point. So the conversation is not over. We're just hopefully getting you started, and you can do your own work on that. So if you need to find a group, you can go to the groups page on the website. So all of that is there. And thanks for joining us on the Bama Podcast this week. We'll talk to you again soon.
Hi, I'm Charles Robison, a Bama listener in Hudson Valley, New York. And here is the prayer from episode 22's companion. To the God who binds us to himself, brings us out of bondage, and never forsakes us, we take you above all and seek to honor your name in all we do, in how we rest, how we celebrate, how we work, and how we choose to live. May we remember your words to us and keep our promises to you. For you've given us so many reminders, not just subtle signs, of your love. Thank you for calling us your treasured possession. May we believe it and live as such. Amen.